The humid air of Guadalcanal presses against the skin, thick as a fever dream. Somewhere in the tangled dark, cicadas shriek, and the sour smell of rot clings to every breath, reminding Captain Hiroki Nishimura that in this jungle, death hides behind every leaf.
Kneeling in wet black earth, his hands wrap around the cold steel of his Arisaka rifle, familiar, certain, a promise of survival.
Around him, 917 veterans hold their silence, their nerves drawn tight beneath sweat-soaked uniforms. They believe this night is theirs, but just beyond the reach of their senses, a new sound stirs. A weapon fierce enough to turn jungle shadows into a living nightmare. By morning, everything they trust will be shattered, not by courage, but by the firepower of a future they never saw coming. Part 1. Preparation and Rising Tension. The tropical mist clung to the jungle floor like a living shroud, the heavy scent of salt and decay hanging in the air. Captain Hiroki Nishimura adjusted his position behind the fallen palm, his fingers tracing the familiar cold steel of his Type 99 Arisaka rifle. Every soldier here knew the value of this weapon. It was not just a rifle, but a testament to their discipline and their emperor's faith. Around him, the men of the 28th Infantry Regiment prepared silently, their eyes sharp, their breaths controlled but shallow. No whispers, no unnecessary movements. Silence was their armor in the dark. Nishimura took a moment to glance at the faces around him. The weariness of long campaigns etched in furrowed brows, but there was also a hardened resolve. These were not fresh recruits, but veterans hardened by years of battle from Manchuria to the Philippines. Each man carried the same confidence from countless victories, a belief that the enemy, isolated and demoralized Marines, were a mere obstacle before their steel and spirit. Yet, beneath the surface of that confidence, something gnawed at Nishimura's instinct. The reconnaissance yesterday had felt off. The usual sharp crack of bolt-action fire was absent. Instead, a strange rhythm of rapid pops had echoed faintly from the American lines. Too fast, too continuous to be the rifles the Japanese forces had faced so many times before. But how could this be? Their intelligence was clear. The Marines were equipped with the same M1903 Springfield bolt-action rifles they had encountered. Across Asia, the disciplined fire of the Arisaka had always been superior in precision and rate of aimed fire. Private Yamamoto, barely 18 but already bearing the scars of the Baton Peninsula, caught Nishimura's eye for a fleeting moment. Yamamoto's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his bayonet, the tension obvious in the younger man's posture, despite the stoic mask he wore. Nishimura's mind wandered briefly to the boy's home far away, to a mother waiting for his safe return. Unaware of the storm brewing in these dark waters, Sergeant Kenji Tanaka, a seasoned marksman, double-checked his ammunition. 120 rounds loaded in stripper clips, each one hand-loaded with precision in Osaka. His blue-black Arisaka gleamed dully in the darkness, a weapon perfected through years of craftsmanship and battle experience. The soldiers prided themselves on being the best trained, the best equipped. They believed their spirit and tactical superiority would overwhelm the Marines. Colonel Kona Ichiki moved through the ranks with the air of a man who had faced death countless times and always emerged victorious. His voice was low but carried the weight of command as he reminded his officers, "The enemy is weak, surrounded, and broken. Their rifles require the same manual operation as ours, but they lack our discipline, our spirit. When we charge, we will crush their will in minutes." The bayonets were fixed with a soft, metallic click, promise and threat entwined in steel. The men shifted their ammo pouches, preparing for the brief but bloody assault that would send the survivors fleeing into the sea. In the stillness before the storm, veteran soldiers worked their bolts quietly. The rhythmic click-clack of the Arisaka a steady heartbeat in the jungle's silence. Yet, the strange popping from American lines lingered in Nishimura's thoughts, a discordant rhythm unlike any weapon he knew. His hands tightened on his rifle. In this moment, beneath the heavy black sky, uncertainty crept through the ranks like a silent poison. What lay ahead was more than just a battle. It was a test of everything they believed the art of war to be. And Captain Nishimura could not shake the feeling that tonight the world he knew was about to rupture. Part 2, The Battle Begins and the Shattering Realization. As the clock edged past 2:30 a.m., the tension in the Japanese ranks became palpable. Captain Nishimura led his company quietly forward, his boots splashing through the ankle-deep water of the retreating tide. The sandbar that lay ahead was a narrow bridge between certainty and chaos, the place where their disciplined precision was to meet the enemy's desperate last stand. The Sendai division moved in perfect formation, their bayoneted Arisakas ready, each bolt cycling mechanically in practiced rhythm. Click, clack, click, clack. The sound was as steady as their heartbeat, a seal of their confidence built from 4 years of unbroken victories. The Marines were said to be cut off, hungry, exhausted. But as they advanced, the jungle air carried a disturbing sound, piercing the night with an unfamiliar rhythm. Pop, 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 pop. It wasn't the slow, deliberate crack of a bolt-action rifle. It was fast, too fast to be a single shooter manually working a bolt, and too controlled to be a wild spray of machine gun fire. Nishimura's breath caught as he raised his rifle towards the faint flashes across the creek. The first shots split the silence, a burst of fire unlike anything he had encountered, but precisely aimed deadly. Men fell around him, not singly but in rapid successions. Private Yamamoto dropped with a bullet through his shoulder. Sergeant Tanaka shuddered on one knee, barely able to cycle his bolt before another shot rang out. The rhythm of American fire had shattered the disciplined tick-tock they had trained to master. Nishimura worked his bolt frantically, click, clack, aimed, fire. But the American across the way unleashed 8 shots in the time it took him to fire once. Impossible. His world spun as the truth dawned ferociously. A semi-automatic rifle, firing as fast as the trigger could be pulled, was cutting down their ranks, the weapon the Japanese had mocked as theoretical. Unreliable or non-existent was real, and it was devastating. The M1 Garand, a rifle that carried 8 rounds per clip, firing rapid, precise bursts without the need to manually cycle the action. Chaos erupted. Colonel Ichiki's confident order for a frontal assault became a deadly gamble. The narrow sandbar transformed into a killing field. The familiar rhythm of the Arisaka became a death sentence as men fell faster than they could reload. The shouts of officers clashed with the relentless pop-pop-pop of American firepower. Amid the smoke, Captain Nishimura saw the battlefield unravel. The proud doctrine of precise, aimed fire and disciplined advance was crumbling. Every Japanese soldier was struggling to keep pace with the devastating volume of semi-automatic fire. The technology they thought ancient was now their Achilles' heel. Through the cacophony, Private Yamamoto staggered to Nishimura's side, voice strained. "Captain, what kind of rifles do they have?"
They fire like machine guns, but
They aim. Nishimura had no answer, only the bitter sting of reality. The warriors who had carved a path across Asia were being outgunned and outpaced on this small island battlefield. As dawn approached, the once confident battalion was reduced to a shattered remnant. Only 15 of the original 9-117 survived, crawling through the surf with wounds and disbelief. The semi-automatic rifle had rewritten the rules of war overnight. The battlefield was no longer a place of honor and precision. It was a grim reminder that war belonged to those who could innovate, and today the future was firing 8 shots in the time it took them to fire 1. Part 3, Aftermath and the Tactical Revolution. The sun began its slow climb over Guadalcanal, washing the beach in a cold, unforgiving light. Captain Hiroaki Nishimura, his leg bandaged with torn fabric, crawled through the surf, his breath ragged, every movement a battle against pain and disbelief. Around him lay the grim trophies of a night shattered formations, broken men, and the deafening silence of defeat. Only 15 of the 9 Sabinseen who had charged with unshaken confidence would live to tell the story. Nishimura's mind replayed the horrific cadence of American fire, the relentless pop, pop, pop that had cut down his comrades faster than they could reload, faster than the precision of the Arisaka's bolt-action cycle. The realization was a bitter blow. The pride of Japanese small arms manufacturing, the weapon they had trusted for decades, had become obsolete overnight. Word spread through the ranks like wildfire. The Americans carried a weapon called the M1 Garand, a semi-automatic rifle that fired as fast as a soldier could pull the trigger, holding 8 rounds in each clip. Intelligence officers, deeply troubled by reports, struggled to grasp the scale of this breakthrough. Semi-automatic rifles were considered experimental at best, a futuristic dream that Japanese military planners never thought practical for mass infantry use. Yet here it was, changing the mathematics of infantry combat entirely. If each American could fire 3 times faster than a Japanese soldier, then numerical superiority meant nothing. 2,000 Marines with Garands brought the firepower of 5,000 Japanese soldiers armed with bolt actions. This was not just a battle lost, it was a tactical revolution. Within weeks, the reality became clear on Guadalcanal and beyond. The 164th Infantry Regiment, arriving later in October, equipped with M1 Garands, would integrate seamlessly with Marine forces, multiplying American firepower exponentially. Veterans from both branches would describe the Garand as the best military hand weapon ever placed on the battlefield. In desperation, Japanese engineers raced to reverse engineer the Garand. At the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal, they struggled to adapt the gas-operated semi-automatic mechanism to fire their 7.7mm ammunition. The result was the Type 4 rifle, an attempt too little, too late. By the end of the war, just under 100 Type 4 rifles had been produced, dwarfed by the millions of Garands in American hands. But the impact was not only material. It tore at the very morale of Japanese soldiers. Those who had once carried their Arisakas with pride were now haunted by the fear of becoming sitting ducks. Every firefight was a race against time. Bolt cycles desperately worked, while American fire poured out like a relentless storm. At Henderson Field, Marine Gunnery Sergeant John Bassilone's machine guns roared in victory. But it was the Garand-equipped infantry that made his supporting fire possible, creating a combined arms synergy the Japanese could not match. This technological leap did not merely change weapons, it reshaped military doctrine. American squads could suppress enemy positions continuously while maneuvering, something impossible with bolt-action rifles requiring pauses for manual operation. The Japanese found themselves tactically obsolete virtually overnight. General George S. Patton would later call the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. For Captain Nishimura and survivors of Guadalcanal, however, it would forever symbolize the moment their military supremacy died on a lonely sandbar in the Pacific. The world of warfare had shifted irrevocably that night. In wars to come, hypersonic missiles, artificial intelligence, drone operations, the lessons of Guadalcanal remain urgent. The military that fails to innovate will not simply lose battles, it will lose wars. The pop, pop, pop that haunted Nishimura's nightmares was more than gunfire. It was the sound of the future arriving, one trigger pull at a time. Part 4, the race for innovation and lasting impact. The echoes of Guadalcanal's brutal night lingered long after the sandbar was stained red and silent. the Imperial Japanese Army found itself staring down a new reality, one where their hardened tactics and trusted weapons
had been superseded in a single battle.
Industrial ingenuity and rapid innovation, Captain Nishimura's words to his commanders echoed through the regimental aid station. Desperate and disbelieving, they fire 8 rounds, then the clip ejects, ping, and again 8 more. No pause, no bolt to work. It's a rifle unlike anything we've faced. Japanese intelligence scrambled to piece together what had happened. Radio intercepts confirmed it. The M1 Garand, fielded in mass numbers, was the semi-automatic rifle that had rewritten the rules of war. Its gas-operated mechanism, complex and delicate, was far beyond Japanese factories' current manufacturing abilities. The race to build a comparable weapon began, but it was already a race they were losing. Beyond the factories and battlefields, the Guadalcanal fight marked a turning point in military thinking. For decades, armies believed that bolt-action rifles, disciplined marksmanship, and close-order tactics would dominate infantry warfare. But now, the importance of volume, sustained fire, and technological superiority was undeniable. American commanders integrated the Garand into combined arms tactics with unprecedented effectiveness. Infantry equipped with rapid firepower could suppress enemy positions while armor and artillery advanced. This multi-dimensional warfare was a tactical symphony the Japanese forces were ill-prepared to counter. The Japanese response was frantic. The Yokosuka Naval Arsenal worked day and night to develop the Type 4 rifle, attempting to replicate the semi-automatic capabilities of the Garand but constrained by limited resources, bombings, and dwindling industrial capacity. Though technically feasible, the Type 4 arrived too late, a mere handful produced before the war's end. The psychological toll on Japanese troops was immense. Those who had been raised amidst the Bushido Code, proud of their rifles and marksmanship, now bore the burden of obsolescence. Facing an enemy who could fire 3 times as fast was a nightmare that broke spirits and shifted the morale battlefield. Meanwhile, on the Allied side, the M1 Garand's success influenced future designs and strategies. Military planners around the world watched closely, realizing that the era of bolt-action infantry rifles was ending. The Cambrian explosion of military technology was underway, semi-automatic, automatic weapons, and soon, entirely new classes of warfare like rocketry and air power would reshape the battlefield. Guadalcanal was more than a battle. It was a signal flare for the future of combat. It demonstrated the critical necessity for armies to embrace change, to innovate relentlessly, or risk extinction. As modern militaries now develop hypersonic missiles, artificial intelligence systems, and swarming drones, the lessons from the pop-pop-pop of that fateful night still ring true. Innovation is war's ultimate weapon. For Captain Nishimura and the survivors of the 28th Infantry Regiment, Guadalcanal was a harsh lesson ingrained deep in their memories. That power can shift overnight, that weapons evolve, and that survival depends not just on courage or skill, but on the ability to adapt to the relentless march of technology. Part 5. Personal Stories and the Human Cost of Innovation. The dust had barely settled on Guadalcanal, but the battlefield's echoes haunted every corner of the Pacific. For the Japanese soldiers who survived, the memories of that night ran deeper than pain or exhaustion. They carried a sense of betrayal by their own weapons and tactics. Captain Haruoki Nishimura, limping and worn, found himself replaying every moment, every fall of a comrade.
Over and over, among those memories was Private Yamamoto, just a boy really, whose courage masked a quiet fear.
Yamamoto had dreamed of honor and glory, but war had revealed a crueler truth. Fear wasn't the enemy today, it was obsolescence, being outgunned, outmatched by a rifle that sang a faster, deadlier song. The sound of the Garand's semi-automatic fire was a haunting rhythm, cutting through the night and through their very souls. Across the ocean, American soldiers didn't just inherit a technological edge, They carried with them a legacy of mass industrial power and innovation. The M1 Garand was not just a weapon. It was a symbol of a nation's ability to rapidly adapt and equip millions of soldiers with cutting-edge tools. Private First Class John Miller, an ordinary soldier with an extraordinary rifle, found himself able to lay down fire that could suppress entire enemy positions, giving his squad the chance to advance and survive. But innovation came at a human cost on both sides. For every Japanese soldier dropped by the startling rate of American firepower, there were American Marines who faced the brutal jungles, the unseen enemy lurking in every shadow, and the weight of constant danger. The M1 Garand gave them fire superiority, yes, but war remained chaos, fear, and loss. Nishimura and Yamamoto's experiences reflected a larger narrative about technology and humanity, how weapons can change the tactics of war, yet the pain and courage of those fighting remains constant. The battlefield was no longer just a test of skill or spirit, but a race against machinery and innovation. Commanders on both sides grappled with this reality. Japanese leaders steeped in traditional doctrine faced a profound challenge: how to maintain morale and fight effectively with inferior firepower. Plans had to adapt, strategies rewired, while soldiers struggled to keep up with an enemy whose killing rhythm was relentless and unforgiving. Meanwhile, American forces refined their tactics around the Garand's strengths: rapid, suppressive fire enabling mobility and combined arms operations. The rifle's semi-automatic nature allowed more soldiers to participate actively in firefights, shifting infantry squads from precision firing units to dynamic, versatile forces through letters home, battlefield journals, and whispered conversations in the jungle. Soldiers on both sides tried to make sense of the new face of war. For Nishimura, the Battle of Guadalcanal was not just a military defeat, it was a fracture in the identity of his army and himself. "We were armed with tradition and courage," he would later reflect. But they had the future in their hands. The relentless pop-pop-pop of the Garand's fire haunted those who survived, not just as a weapon sound, but as a reminder that in war, the edge belongs to those who innovate, who adapt, and who dare to change. Part 6, Legacy and Lessons for Modern Warfare, 10 to 11 minutes, VO. Guadalcanal did not simply mark a turning point in World War II, it heralded a new era of warfare. The introduction of the M1 Garand was more than a technological advancement, it was a symbol that the speed of innovation could change the fate of nations overnight. Captain Nishimura's harrowing experience underscored a stark truth. Military strength was no longer measured only by bravery or numbers, but by the ability to harness technology and adapt rapidly. The Japanese reliance on bolt-action rifles, rooted deeply in tradition and training, was exposed as a fatal weakness against mechanized firepower. Around the world, militaries took note. The semi-automatic rifle became the benchmark for infantry weapons, reshaping arsenals and doctrines globally. Countries that embraced innovation outpaced those who clung to obsolete tactics and equipment. Modern warfare continues to evolve with technologies unimaginable to the soldiers of Guadalcanal: hypersonic missiles, artificial intelligence, autonomous drones. But the core lesson remains unchanged. Innovation isn't optional. It is essential. The price of failure is measured not just in casualties, but in strategic defeat. Veterans like Nishimura, who witnessed the battlefield's brutal transformation, carried those lessons forward, reminding future generations that no army can afford to ignore the relentless march of technology. The pop-pop-pop of the Garand wasn't just a sound, it was the drumbeat of change that still resonates in today's conflicts. As military planners and strategists move forward, the Guadalcanal legacy stands as a warning and a guide. Wars can be won or lost by the surprise of new technologies. Those who adapt survive, those who do not perish. Closing, the pop-pop-pop of the M1 Garand still echoes more than a gunfire sound. It is a symbol of change, a harsh reminder that in war, the future belongs to those who innovate, Captain Nishimura's battlefield was a sandbar in the Pacific, but the lesson stretches across time and battlefields. The weapon you carry is more than steel. It is the very heartbeat of victory or defeat. As the world races forward with new technologies, Guadalcanal's story warns us all. Adaptation is not just survival. It is the soul of war itself.